our next speaker on the Rhoda today is Natasa Milic-Frayling, who, among other things, is the founder of Intact Digital Limited and also the chair of Technology and Research Working Group at UNESCO PERSIST. And Natasa is here to sort of delve in a little bit more into discussing the long-term use of software. So discussing digital continuity and not just sort of isolated preservation as in archiving. And she's going to do that by discussing how to manage the aging of software and then how to maintain access over time when you can no longer keep that on site and it must be decommissioned. So we're just going to do a quick tech turnover and then we'll be right back with you. There's even a live demo. So I wait with bated breath.
So yes, indeed, I'm very excited to be here today. And as Sarah said, I'm wearing a number of different hats. I'm a professor at the University of Nottingham, where I'm a chair of data science. I also, as I said, as Sarah mentioned, I'm a founder of Intact Digital, and I'm so excited because this is actually one of the rare occasions I actually wear that hat. The organization started about 3 years ago, and I really would like now, I'm very excited to share with you the vision we are actually trying to implement here. So believe it or not, but today I will not use the word preservation at all, because the mission really is about something much broader than that. It's about digital continuity. So imagine the world in which actually all this conditioning under which we have grown up, that software may actually stop working and that you won't be able to do what you want to do. Imagine that that world is gone. And so you don't have to worry whether the software is there or not, and you should be able to seamlessly access anything and have full confidence that whatever you have created is right there. In a way, digital technology is the first one that can make us immortal. I can take any model of myself, just have to stay in front of Xbox and my whole body is scanned. You can hear my voice, that can be also preserved. So in a way, anything seems to be possible with digital. And why is it then that we can't enable this digital continuity? So that's why I will not talk about preservation. I really want us to completely move to a different level and say, nope, there's nothing about preservation. It's really about continuing use. So in that, I will kind of try to explain how that concept fit into this reasoning about the ecosystem and all the other elements that we do think about when we're talking preservation. The mission of that sort of vision is really to look at the software in particular, because as I will explain, and I think we all know, in digital technologies, encoding is digital, and therefore any interpreter of that is some sort of software, some sort of logic that needs to be there. Otherwise, we don't have anything. We simply cannot read the bits. We humans cannot read the bits. So in a way, the software is so essential, and it's not always visible. In a way, we're so used to things popping out on the screen that we don't really realize that actually there was a software that did that. So in this presentation, I will first talk about this digital ecosystem and where this software lifespan fits. And then I will demonstrate a couple of aspects of what we promote is the managed services for digital continuity, which means that somebody needs to take care of this infrastructure and the methodology to prolong the life of software. Yeah. And so in this digital ecosystem, the problem really is that while we create the digital assets that have much longer value, longer in time, the software doesn't last. So in a way, the ecosystem is such that we need to innovate, and that innovation, which is so intrinsic in our progress, actually is the one that undermining the stability of it. So if you look at the ecosystem, I'm here putting a sort of summary. On one side, we have technologies And then, as Neil explained, it's all about experiences. A lot of instances, you got experience to support. And you do that because there are some things that are persisted, so there are files. And so if you look at this ecosystem, they all needs to come together and needs to be in sync, because the technology stack or enabling technologies here, which actually are much, much more complex in computing environments than we often think about. Even just running a simple Adobe Reader, one has to think carefully, what is it that helps me see this PDF on screen? And if you unpick it, you really see there are so many different software underneath, supporting just that simple experience. Yeah? So in a way, the complexity on technology is huge. And as Neil mentioned, just if you try to instruct people how to take care of the software, you really need to think about all of these types of software that's there, from security software all the way to operating system. Yeah? And then on the right-hand side, this is where we like to be. We like to take care of our files, and we kind of care about documents. And we also pat it on the back when we do backups, and another backup, and another backup. So yeah, so we are all good because we are taking care of our files. The problem is that those files are useless unless we have the rest. And both of them come together into this experience. And the experience is the one that actually gives the value to the whole thing. When we humans can consume it, when we can repurpose it, when we can share it, when we can use it for communication, for thinking, for knowledge, that's that experience. That's what where the value is created. Now, this is how it looks, and this is not your eyes not seeing well. I actually disturbed, kind of tries to explain how unstable this is. So if you perturb this a little bit, this is the real mess. It's constantly readjusting itself. The technology ecosystem is constantly readjusting, because this is exactly what innovation happens. If any of the players here decides to innovate and say, okay, I'm going to have a new driver, new printer driver, I'm going to have a new protocol, whatever that innovation is going to disturb everything else. So everybody then has to realign and come back into kind of focus. On the right-hand side, you see the data is pretty much stable. If you look at unless you lose something, pretty much the storage is still okay there, and you can see it. But the experience in this battle between the innovation and its ability, that's what experience suffers. Yeah. So this is the instability of the ecosystem, and I just want to emphasize again, without software, without interpreting these files that we have pretty much in stable form, without that, really the experience doesn't exist. And here is the kind of in focus. It is really the software application or software system. Here's just in simpler form, just to understand who in the ecosystem sort of controls and owns things. So most of us are producers or publishers or distributors. We create value through digital assets. That may be documents, maybe videos, maybe games, maybe programs of simulation and so on. This is where we sit. We use technology to do that. The ICT industry and ICT community, so open source community and commercial sector, they are experts. They provide the logic. They provide the encoding of that logic in terms of programs. That comes together and then creates experiences. So it's true that people who produce the documents and produce the content, there is a value chain here that at the end, the value can be created from the consumption of it. So this is how things fit. The question only now is understanding the roles of the technology providers and the content owners. That dialogue, we need software in order to produce content and to distribute. That dialogue needs to be changed slightly, because at the moment it feels that the ICT industry is the one that controls most of the time, because they can move on to the next version of whatever they want anytime they feel that they need to, either because the customers want it or because the market is such that there is an opportunity and so on. So at the moment, there is in this value exchange, really, there's not enough of the empowerment, I believe, on the left side. So, sorry, on the right-hand side, where the content owners are. And that's where we suffer. That's where we say, okay, my data got obsolete, my formats got obsolete, everything gets obsolete because there is incompatibility with the software that's on the left side. Okay, so basically this is kind of ecosystem view. And then in all of this, how do we then achieve this digital continuity? What are the key factors? And I just pick here three sort of principles and say, first of all, if we can get a little bit more control over the left side, the technology side, where it could change at any time. How about if I can just curb that a little bit? So I can control the aging. So instead of having a kind of step function, things work, and suddenly doesn't work because something was misaligned. How about if I can actually have a gentle stage, gentle aging of software so that I'm prepared. My application may not have all the functionality, may not completely work as it was, but I'll control which features will work. So that's why virtualization is pretty good about this, because just like we saw the shoeboxes and the time capsule, we can create the digital time capsules. And in these digital time capsules, we can control a little bit how the software will behave. And that's the key bit in this approach of virtualization, primarily for enabling control aging. And then the issue here comes is the cost. It was mentioned in the audience. Indeed, as opposed to the book that I put on the shelf, it doesn't breathe air. I don't really need anything for the physical to preserve. All the libraries and archives will probably argue, no, shelves, there is a shelf cost. So there is definitely cost there as well. But the issue with digital is it has to spin. It needs electricity. It needs machines. So it does have a cost. Intrinsically, it does have a cost. And so the issue here is about sustainability of whatever service we provide, because that cost needs to be balanced by the value. That's basically it, and that's the secret. And of course then, in order to spread the cost, especially for something that's rarely used. That's the key here. It's rarely used. No matter how we love something, the production or ongoing things are going to be used all the time. Our history, our legacy, normally is rare use. It is a critical use often, especially if you have a legislation or something. It's a critical use. Or if you need to look at the drug because suddenly there's a side effect, you need to go back. So this is the critical but rare use. And that sort of presents a challenge because all the infrastructure normally are being evaluated based on frequency of use, utilization. You can say, oh, you use it this much you have pay. And if you say, no, but I didn't use it that often, but I still want some money for it. So it's really hard when you have no utilization at the frequency level. It's really hard to argue so that's why we need this economy of scale, so that even though it's a rare use, we can still sustain it. So as you mentioned already, Neil mentioned what are the drivers for this value that will counterbalance the cost. And so I picked here two. The perceived risk is one of the key elements. I perceive risk if I don't have something or I cannot enable it. Well, just in case, I'm going to prepare to pay for it. Similarly, like you're buying insurance for a car, right? So nothing may happen, but still, I'm prepared to pay just in case, because I know if it hits, it hits. So the only question now here is we don't want to talk about insurance. We don't want anybody's money for something that we lose, because we don't want to lose anything. So it's not about insurance, it's about assurance, making sure that actually things don't get lost. So it's slightly different, which also means that we don't necessarily have easy to copy business models, because it's not about insurance. It's not compensating for the loss. It is actually preventing the loss. Yeah. So I will just talk about these two: a risk and appreciation of digital assets. Now, in many instances, you have situations when the content can be repurposed. So that means that something is going to appreciate the value over time. Digital art will be fantastic for that, because there is no Picasso 21st century if you look at digital art. Nothing survives beyond 3 months. My master students, when they do programs, they don't survive 15 days after they submitted their code and so on. So I just want to say there is still hope that we can achieve the appreciation of digital value. If we can sustain it over time, that would be fantastic. And I think it will be celebrated by all the artists, because at the moment they can't claim that they have created something and they can't resell it. There's no appreciation time because of the obsolescence. So therefore, I think we'll become there. There's another scenario where I'm very much aware from data science. People are now looking at historical data. So they do want to have things access to the past. But again, when this is going to pick up, we don't know. And whether they really would care much about the old software, maybe not. So, but at the moment, the risk really is driving. So I picked two scenarios that kind of support this concept of creating the infrastructure managed services, where people can just come in, say, here's the software, I want it hosted for this amount of time, I want it used sporadically, tell me how much it costs. And it is the situation that the title of this gathering today and the briefing is about, how many coins do I need to give you in order to have this running? And that may actually be the business model. It is really key here to understand how to get economy of scale and what will be the business model that will support that economy of scale. So I picked two examples in this kind of risk management. One is sort of related to practices in preservation of national cultural heritage. And this is one of the one of the clients we have. In fact, we call them friends because we're actually working very hard to think through how can software that is being used actually by preservation experts, how can that be assured for the future? So this is Tamal Vista Insights company, and Wayne DeFremery is professor of Korean poetry at the University of Sogang in Korea. He created a software, he has started a company, and that software enables essentially to take text and be able to extract vocabulary from the scripts that, the scripts are very tough. OCR doesn't do anything, so it's image processing to really extract and enable search of these manuscripts. So where is the issue? Well, the issue is that, yes, the software is great, and it was adopted by Buddhist monasteries to look at the manuscripts. However, this project lasts 20 years, and he just started a company. So there's a dissonance between a startup company that actually may take off in 2 or 3 years, 5 years, and something that needs to last for 20 years. So of course, people who are using it are scratching their heads and thinking, oops, how much effort should I put in this? What happens if it happens? If it doesn't happen, doesn't last, yeah? So really, this is now again drives for risk. The risk is this going to last? Because it is the entity that is in charge of it and the entity that is proposed. You can give it to open source community, so maybe the open source community can take it. Yeah, that's one exit. However, there's no promise that somebody in open source community will be so enthusiastic to continue maintaining the software that you or maybe few in the world want. So in a way, there's the issue about what happens if it happens, if it doesn't last, the legal entity doesn't last. So we worked together on this and said, okay, no problem. We're going to look at, you put your software, here is the infrastructure. It's almost like a deposit of software. We make sure it's working, put it in a time capsule, and just continue. We continue managing it and making sure that this time capsule runs. So whatever is in the time capsule keeps stable. Whatever is underneath, you keep changing. And you keep changing into intact what is inside and what in this case is the software provider wants to. So basically what he has done, what is also interesting is in startup companies, you have multiple copies. Every 6 months, they keep fixing things, and they want another one and another one, another one. So I'll just show you how things look on the platform. Here, in the same environment, we basically host multiple versions of the software. So here is the older version of the software, and here is the next version. So there's no problem. In a way, in the time capsule, you can put any, and it's not your escrow for source code. It's actually the working software. So I'm just going to explain. So this is, again, the risk management, but the important thing is this is at the beginning of the life cycle of the software. So we have on board somebody who the software may take off, but this person is already thinking what happens. They're thinking about the licensing, they're thinking about the features that they want to be preserved. So this is basically where we want to be. When it comes to digital continuity, we got to get ICT providers to think about the customers and the impact of their software. So this is one scenario, and let me now go to the second one, which is the scenario that may be of interest because it's not often seen in a preservation community. This is about compliance driven scenario. In almost all the industries that are sort of heavily regulated, this will be observed. So you may have a piece of equipment, and that piece of equipment may be enabling work, a certain type of work. Then what often happens is any work in that industry is controlled by industry standard. And these standards are often very high level. So that means that every organization has to create a policy in order to comply with that standard. So I'm going to give you one example. This is like a pharmaceutical setup where you have a machine. We have an equipment instrument, and these are extremely important because these instruments are used to process the samples from studies, blood samples, any specimen that are collected, and then they're analyzed, and then of course at the very end, the only way you can see what you've done is by having some visualization tool, some analytics tool. That's all in software. So it is linked together, and that software is running on a PC, and believe it or not, often is the only software on the PC. So they're so careful about not having any interference. And the whole process of actually putting this in place is a very, very carefully controlled process. Yeah. So in a way, what was the question that Daniel had to answer before, how do we know, is it validated, is it software validated, and so on. Here, for these installations, they have a very strict validation rules. So there's no question, because whatever it was determined to be validation criteria, that has to stay. So, so whenever decommissioning happens, then there is a problem. You have a raw data, and that raw data has to be maintained forever. That's basically what the regulators say, indefinitely. And then, if you're asked to look at the raw data, the analysis needs to be produced, the same way as you report it. Okay, and so that has to stay. That means that the software that they used, that needs to be around. If you are still using the same vendor, then normally it's not a problem, because the vendors are very clever. They know that there's this problem, so they will maintain backward compatibility. But that also means that you're locked in. You have to continue buying from this vendor, or if the vendor decides to discontinue the product, or the vendor is not in business anymore, then there's nothing you can do. You might be able, because you have an older version of the software, but that version is not going to run on new operating system. Therefore, the only thing you can do now is take this software and then make sure that you create this time capsule. The time capsule is stable, and then continue maintaining the hypervisor, everything around it, virtualize it, and keep that stable. But you have to make sure that whatever is inside the capsule satisfies the criteria that you set in the first place. Yeah. So I just want to show you now how that's done. I'll show you one example of the decommissioning and what has been done. So here's a portal. So suppose the company has an account that can just log in. And so in this, this is now talking to the server. And here's a desktop kind of environment. We make it very simple. So there are a couple of environments already there. This is called Analyst Desktop because the software is called Analyst. And this one is running on XP. On that side over there is Maslink's Desktop. And that one is running on Windows 7. And then in the middle, actually, is the whole image of a PC that they wanted to have reserved. So you kind of have mixed strategies. The key here is that, so I'm just going to open this quickly. So, so this is going to be, this is Analyst. And so this is now going to start XP. I'll go back and open Maslinks. So this is opening a new tab. This is Windows 7. And I also open the image. So just going first to the Analyst Desktop. So this is now basically a virtual machine in a cloud, activated on demand to just have access to this software. So if they have a coin, they can use it. So I just want to say, this can be completely by subscription. It could be maintained. I can explain a little bit later. But essentially here is XP, Microsoft decided to stop support a long ago. So having this on premises is actually danger. So putting it somewhere else, but still owning it. So this license here is a license that belongs to them. It doesn't belong to Intact Digital. We actually are just providing the software that is creating. Software belongs to other people. So licensing agreement is the ones that was inherited from the contracts with a vendor. So and vendor and the client are aligned. So I think this is very important because in this sort of scenario, sort of the industry itself has already something sorted out that we normally suffer when we're talking generally about the preservation. So I just want to show you. So here is the Analyst, and here is the data is already involved. I just want to show you the samples of data here. In fact, are accessible in two different ways. We basically set up a special drive. It's called Share Drive. So the data is available. And this data is available from any time capsule. So once you fill it there, and you don't have to have it in the cloud at all. you can just use the upload function here, and then you can import the data that you want. So it's not really, it's all about forcing people to put data in one place. In fact, the flexibility is very important for them because they actually store data in a special repository. It's all checksummed. So then when they move it into this environment, it's checksummed again. And also there's a validation of software to just make sure that the software wasn't corrupt in the meantime. Yeah. So all of these principles are kind of moved throughout all the software. Here is Masslinks. This is Windows 7. And the reason I just want to show you this one is because guess what? Windows 7 is going to be out of support next year. January 2020, it will be one of those shakeups, just to show you an ecosystem, when so many software packages will now need to be realigned because everybody who is serving communities like this will have to essentially move to Windows 10. So I like to just stop here and just explain. This is the driver for preservation. Just show you here. This is one of the drivers, what we call the managed services, that in fact, these managed services require a good care on all three different levels. One is about creating a digital vault that belongs to whoever owns the software, and enabling them that they can run this sort of on demand when they need to, and make it so easy because people cannot deal with virtual machines and think about how they're going to spin them out. That all needs to be seamless in order to provide the true value to all the stacks of the users in the organization. I'll stop here, so thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. So we are running a bit past time, so we're just going to launch straight into Roberto's talk. So if you have questions for Natasha, which I'm sure you do, please scribble those down, and then we'll take a little bit of time before lunch to ask, to do a little bit of Q&A.